This week, I finally painted a Crisis Protocol miniature. Hi guys, Jonathan from Two Raven Studios. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Please subscribe, we have new videos every week. And I just want to say I really appreciate everyone. When I first started filming the painting for this video, I was at 700 subscribers, and I was going to say thanks for getting me to 700, but now I'm over 750 already, so it's really growing, and I really appreciate everybody who subscribes. So this week what we're going to do is paint a Crisis Protocol miniature. If you're familiar with the game, you know the X-Men just came out, so there's a 2-pack. It has Wolverine, who's a jerk character and we don't care about. So we're going to paint Sabretooth. So this week's video is going to be dealing with this. The way I painted him was actually by using inks and contrast paints and using transparency to get some cool effects. So we're going to go over that in today's video. So let's hop right into it. So we're going to start off with muted pink ink, and we're going to spray this into the recesses from a low angle. So like I said, we're going to be working with transparency here, so this is going to be shading our later steps. So we're going to repeat the last step, this time with magenta ink, and just reinforce those shadows. So in the darkest parts, we're going to put this magenta ink to give us a little bit of a darker shadow. This will all make sense after the next step. We're just doing a little bit of pre-shading here. So now using Nasdrag yellow contrast paint through the airbrush, I'm going to spray the entire miniature. Pink underneath the yellow color is going to give us a nice rich shadow. So you can kind of see how that's working as I spray the miniature. Not all the parts of Sabretooth's costume are this color, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm spraying the entire costume this color. You can see how it's interacting with that pink underneath, giving us some very nice warm shadows. Like I said in the beginning, we're working with the transparency of the paints we're using to get some cool effects. So now I'm just going in with Indian yellow ink from a high angle, and again, this is still transparent, so it's going to be a little bit of a subtle effect. I'm just going to add a little bit of highlights here. Again, we're still working with transparency and adding some subtle highlights here. Once we're done with this step, we're going to move over to the regular brush. Still with contrast paints, now I'm just going to go in with Cygor Brown and paint all the details of the costume that are brown this color. You want to try to take your time with this and make sure it doesn't pull up in any areas and we get a nice smooth coat. The sculpt of this model is very nice, and there's very sharp lines defining where the color shift is in this costume. Next up, we're going to paint the fur on his back. I'm using Men Off-White base from P3, but any kind of off-white bone color will work here. We're just nice and quick putting a base coat over this fur. And next up, we're going to base the face. I'm using a mix of Beast Hide and Midland Flesh from P3, but you can use any flesh tone you like. We're just basing the face in a flesh tone. Try to be careful and not get this paint on any of the colors we've already painted. And next up, we're going to use Moldy Ochre and paint the hair. So the hair on the head, the eyebrows, the sideburns, all of them are getting just this pale yellow color. You don't have to use the exact paints I'm using, just the idea and similar colors. Now we're moving into oil paints, and what I'm using here is purple color just across the flesh tones. This is thinned down with mineral spirits, and if you've watched my videos, you know how I use oil paints. We're just kind of giving some shading to the face. Then we're going to repeat the process with the main color of the costume using burnt sienna. I'm also going to use the same color on the hair of the head. So the hair and the costume are getting burnt sienna thinned down with some mineral spirits. Just letting it run into the recesses and give us a little bit more shading. And then next up, we're using burnt sienna with a little Naples yellow mixed in to give us a pale brown color, and we're shading the fur on his back with this color. Lastly, for the costume, we're going to do some ivory black oil paints on the brown parts. Again, thinned down with mineral spirits. I painted the base gray off camera, and what I'm just using here is a mix of ivory black, burnt sienna, and sap green oil paints slightly thinned down. I'm randomly putting them all over the base, making them kind of splotchy. And now with a makeup sponge, I'm just going over all of the paints that I just painted and wiping off the oils a little bit to leave them in the recesses. You can kind of see what I'm doing here on the base. Kind of dabbing it to give it a little bit of weather texture here on the base and leaving the paint in the recesses just to give us a nice weathered effect. Now we're going to highlight, so we're going to go back in and give us a little bit of sharp highlights. So the first color I'm using is Meaty Ochre from P3. It's an ochre color that we're going to use on the main color of the costume. So you want to hit all of the raised edges to help bring out the depth of everything a little bit more. We did a lot of work in the shadows, now we just want to add a little bit to the highlights. And next up, we're going to mix a little bit of Moldy Ochre into our Mediocre and further refine those highlights. So we're just making a little bit of a lighter yellow color here. Kind of see what I'm doing on the chest. Small little lines. You don't want to overdo it. Just to help make the folds pop a little bit more. The muscles are very well sculpted on this miniature, and we just want to help highlight that with the paint. Do some edge highlighting around some of the sharp edges. Now I'm going in with a mix of Sickly Skin, which is an off-white color, and Moldy Ochre, which was the base color for the hair, and just highlighting the hair. You could use white mixed in with whatever you did with base color. I just like Sickly Skin. It's a slightly off-white that I use in place of white. Just again, little tiny highlights here and there to just bring out the sculpted hair. And we're going to repeat that process on the face, this time with the Sickly Skin mixed in with the Beast Hide, which was part of the mix of our flesh tone. Again, just going across the cheekbones and the bridge of the nose, the parts that would catch the light. And lastly, with Pure Sickly Skin, which again is that off-white color, we're going to highlight the fur on his back. So by using the same color as our highlight for everything, we kind of help tie the different parts of the miniature together. Again, you could use white if you want to. This is just a slight off-white color. And I wasn't happy with the face, so I went in with some Volupus Purple contrast paint into the mouth and around the eyes, just to bring out a little bit more detail and some vibrancy of the face. And what I did here was I mixed some bootstrap leather with the Cygor brown contrast, and I'm highlighting the brown parts. So the Cygor brown was the color we based this with, so we're just adding in a paint in with the contrast, which this was an experiment. I really liked the way it worked. But again, we're just highlighting the sculpt. And lastly, we're going to highlight the base with some Crixbane highlight. This is actually the color that I based this with before the oil paints. But we're just dotting on. You can see the motion of the brush even though it's out of focus. You just finish off the base and then we're done. So here's the finished miniature. The part that really stands out is that orange ochre part of the costume. It's why we spent the time doing all that pre-shading to make it look pretty cool. So I really like the way that the undershading and the transparency gives us a very cool effect very easily on the costume. I'm very happy with the way my first fully painted Crisis Protocol figure turned out. Hope you guys found that useful. It's kind of funny, I've had Crisis Protocol since it came out. I buy every release, and this is the first time I've fully painted one of the miniatures. If you'd like to see more Crisis Protocol miniatures painted, let me know in the comments below, because I have plenty of them that need painting. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. I'm going to leave some links to other videos. I have the painting of the measurement sticks for Crisis Protocol, as well as something YouTube thinks you're going to like. So until next time, go on gaming and paint your minis.